Welcome to Delivery Made Easy with CarrierTrack Technologies. This is season 1, episode 2, and we got our guest back, Tod Erickson, Director of IT, New Hampshire Union Leader, and Jason Fry, Senior Business Development Manager with RouteSmart. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good morning.
And Jason, I love the photo behind you. I understand we were interrupting your vacation. We really appreciate you taking the time this morning and joining us.
I painted that as the sun went down last night.
There you go. And Tod, you're holding the station down up in New Hampshire. All good up there?
Yes, all good. Everything is good. You're not interrupting anything with me today. So.
all routes are covered. Everything's good.
That's right. Exactly. We're in good shape right now.
Very good. And special thanks to the background crew, Oscar and Rick, for keeping us up and running and getting our podcasts out to all of our loyal listeners. Today's podcast, we're going to cover 3 different areas. We're going to discuss the ins and outs of pinning geocodes. And again, don't worry if this gets a little detailed. We're going to do some follow-up videos specific with screenshots showing you exactly where these are at in the system. We're just kind of going to walk through the different functions today. The second one will be understanding geocodes and the delivery ellipse. So again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to learn how to use this and improve your delivery aspect out in the field. The third one will be fixes to common issues that you find in the field while using an Android device on your delivery. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tod.
Yep.
Tod is rocket scientist number 1.
There you go.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Right.
So I think, Jeff, the thing you wanted to first touch on, and it's really sort of on the RouteSmart side is where this comes into play. But because RouteSmart is your interface between your Circ system and CarrierTrack, it's really important for typically it's not a carrier, usually it's a zone manager or a district manager or somebody who's responsible for the carriers that's working with them to get the addresses the way that they need to be for the drivers. So we always have 2 situations, and Jason and I and Jeff, I've mentioned this to you, we talk about this a lot, is when you get a new route, so you're new to CarrierTrack and to RouteSmart, you get your data flowing from your Circ system, and then you're presented with the RouteSmart interface for your route, and you're like, okay, so where do we go from here? Well, the real important thing there is, if I can emphasize it more than any other single thing, is that any time that you spend in RouteSmart is going to pay you back 5 times over in CarrierTrack. So the normal, when we have a new driver or when we first started this whole process, the whole thing was like, all right, get my phone, I'm ready to roll, off you go. And the work hasn't even begun at that point yet. So the CarrierTrack is executing on all of sort of the homework that you've done in RouteSmart, and then RouteSmart is passing all that data to CarrierTrack to do all of the things that it does so well. So you just have to be very conscious of the fact that the 2 are working very closely together, and you have to make sure that you're doing the right things in the right places. So I'll hit something else later, Jeff, in the common issues and problems that we have. But when you get a new route in RouteSmart, you have addresses that haven't been geocoded yet. So let's say an address is put in incorrectly, it's a typo, it has a bad street number or something like that. Then what you will see is that will come, as you know, Jason, the top of the list. You'll have to reconcile that address somehow and get it to be correct. Now that could even be with going back into your Circ system and fixing it there, because that's where everything goes. But once you get that route in RouteSmart, then what happens there is RouteSmart will optimize the route for you. So RouteSmart will say, has this great engine that looks at everything and says, okay, I have all these addresses. I'm going to put them in the order that I think is the way to go. And RouteSmart will do that and do a great job at that. The problem is that very rarely is the optimized route going to be the way that the carrier wants to do it. Because as we've talked about, they like to, go backwards up the street this way, cut across the neighbor's driveway, and keep going and doing all that. So RouteSmart's going to optimize that to do it abiding by the traffic laws and making sure that you're going on the correct side of the street. You don't go the wrong way up a one way, all that kind of stuff. But we all know that the carriers are going to zigzag across the street and do all that. So the pinning of a location, and what we mean for folks that haven't seen it by pinning, in RouteSmart, they have this great mapping module portion of the software. And what RouteSmart will allow you to do is go in and actually go right to the very street mailbox level and put a pin, just like you would if you're familiar with Google Maps or Waze or one of those, where you can pin right down to where you are, where you need to go. So what will happen at that point is we can then pin an address exactly where we want it to be. And then once we have pinned that address, because for folks unfamiliar with it, in RouteSmart, we have what's called a rooftop geocode. Yep. Now, in an area like, say, where Jason is, where it's fairly congested, or where Jeff is, that works out pretty well most of the time. Yep. But in New Hampshire or rural areas where a person could have a 2 or 3 acre plot of land, then what will happen is that may rooftop geocode hundreds of yards off the street and actually show you where it is. So typical scenario that I'll give, driver will roll up to that location, deliver the paper, and CarrierTrack will make no acknowledgement that the paper's been delivered. Well, that's because of the thing that we call and Jeff mentioned, what we call the delivery ellipse. In other words, the invisible area around where you're delivering, that CarrierTrack will be looking to find that geocoded spot. And with the rooftop geocoding, if it's too far back or too far to one side or what have you, or another scenario is you have like a farm, something like that. Sure. There are no farms in New Hampshire, so this never happens. Right. But you have a farm where the house is way off the street, but they have a tube and a mailbox way down the street. So the pinning is the homework that everybody should be doing to get the exact location of where the paper's being delivered, not necessarily where the house is, but where you're actually delivering the paper. And by pinning that location, you basically put a stake in the ground, say, this is where I'm going to be delivering. Yeah. And then from there, CarrierTrack can pick up on the geocode of the pin and then deliver to that exact location. And the number one complaint we get on a new route is the drivers are like, well, I rolled up, made my delivery, and it didn't reconcile. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, we go look at it. It's because, the pinning is way off, or the reconciliation of where that original geocode may be versus where, say, the house was actually built, right, may be way off. So we tell all of our managers and our carriers, get together, go through. It's tedious. Yep. It can be time consuming, yep. But it will pay you back 1,000 times over. Yeah, I mean, pin them all.
I often say, look, the hardest part of working with RouteSmart is the geocoding, and I don't mean it's difficult. I mean, right, you have to do it. Yes. If you don't get that right, everything else is going to be moot. Doesn't matter. So yes, I appreciate. I appreciate personally the validation for the things that, as a sales guy, I'm saying, right? You're only believing 50% of it anyway. We all understand that. Right. That one, hopefully, you're believing.
Yes, exactly. Paper delivery is a funny animal because, as both of you know, there's all sorts of different delivery things. There's, package, and there's waste management, and there's all kinds of things. Well, with when you're doing waste management or you're doing package delivery, yeah, the person is driving up and they're going to go and find the door.
Right.
And usually that's going to be between the hours of 8 and 6. And, it's a buckshot. Close enough is good enough,
Right.
It's almost there is good in horseshoes, hand grenades, and package delivery.
That's right.
Close. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's dark. It may be snowy or rainy or cold or whatever. And when you're following that phone, you want to know when you roll up, you've hit the spot. This is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the other great thing in conjunction with that, with CarrierTrack, is it'll also show you the delivery instructions. So it'll say, tube next to this mailbox, or put it in the hollowed out bare belly next to the big rock and put it in there, So if you pin it and then your special instructions, you're there, So we always say any route has to go through like a process.
Right.
It's pin and sequence, and then you're ready to go.
Would it be fair then to say that obviously you want a high geocode and automatic high geocoding rate, but that's a little bit of a false sense of security then, right? Because there's still n number of them that you're going to have to move.
Yeah, definitely, Jason. Because to everyone's credit, this whole process, the geocode rate is really high.
Right.
It's in the high 90s. If I get a brand new route with 200 papers on it, it maybe one,
right,
maybe two will need to be worked on. But other than that, you're good to go. But the geocode just gets you the ticket into the building.
Yep.
Now you got to find your seat.
Right.
And the pinning is finding your seat.
Yeah.
And then the carrier will then, how we do it is we'll go through and we'll pin it. We'll give them the route. If it's a new route, we'll give them the route, and they'll say, okay, yep, I've driven this before. I've done it before. Yep. I need to move all these around. And what they'll do is they'll take the RouteSmart delivery list, mark it all up, and give it back to us. And then the manager will resequence it. And then we're golden at that point. So it works out really well. And the other thing that really is a great tool too is the driver can update the geocode in CarrierTrack on the phone.
Nice.
So if we have issues with pins and it's not quite in the right spot, we're almost there, we tell the driver, just roll up. And when you get there, update the geocode on the phone. We'll get that back in our report. If it's greater than 400 feet from the delivery location, we'll update that, and then it'll be updated for subsequent deliveries, and then we're good to go.
And the important thing with that is that they're doing that update from exactly where they're delivering that paper to, because that captures the exact latitude, longitude of that location. So I always tell them, don't update it from across the street. Don't update it as you're coming down the block. Don't do it on a slow roll.
Yes.
When you stop, stop obviously for safety. Don't drive and do this while you're doing it. But where you're delivering it to, that tube, the porch, wherever it happens to be, that's when you hit that update, and it'll record the exact latitude, longitude of where you're at, and then obviously take that back again to whoever's inputting that into RouteSmart and update it from there. That once it's in RouteSmart, it will stay there forever.
Yes.
If you do not put it in RouteSmart, that update that you just did on CarrierTrack will stay in CarrierTrack as long as your sequence stays the same.
Right.
If you've changed the sequence, then you will lose that latitude, longitude. So that's why it's always best to put it back into the RouteSmart system.
Yeah.
And then it will stay that way, forever until it's updated again.
Yeah, and
exactly.
And you guys may or may not know this, but you mentioned that we do rooftop geocoding. We did experiment with bare belly geocoding. rate wasn't as good. So
yes, exactly.
so
Yes,
we stuck
exactly.
with Swift.
Yeah, we did the mossy rock method, but it didn't really work very well.
Tire swings, mossy rocks, those kind of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The 67 Chevy with cinder blocks in the front yard, which is in many parts of rural New Hampshire is a common sight.
Oh, so. I remember, especially early on, the not that the concept of geocoding is new, but in this context it was. And some of the addresses, obviously, we're talking, dating myself over a decade ago, but we're talking, you'd see addresses that come out, or even directions. Turn left at the tire swing. It's the fourth house on the right.
Yes.
Past the, to your point, 67 Chevy on block.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And it wasn't like one off. There was a ton of them.
Yes, so absolutely. Absolutely. And I
am a native, more prevalent in your area.
Yes. And I'm a native New Hampshireite, so I can make that statement with all confidence, and anyone can call me out on it because I live here and I love the place. So
nice. Love it.
And the thing that Jeff also mentioned about it's important to update the geocode on the device where you're making the delivery.
Yeah.
And that's another good feature that we have in CarrierTrack. CarrierTrack will update the geocode if it's within 400 feet of the original geocode location. Oh. And then we get a report each day in our CarrierTrack portal that will ask us to approve geocodes that are beyond that ellipse. And we actually get quite a few of them. And as Jeff will see, what happens is that there's a couple of functions on the phone on CarrierTrack. There's one where you can reconcile a delivery manually. So for some reason, it didn't chime and automatically reconcile. So you need to tell it manually, I hit this stop. Right. But a lot of times what the drivers will do is they accidentally will hit update the geocode instead of reconcile. And you'll get the update the geocode for 167 Adams Lane to the Dunkin' Donuts 6 miles away, because they will stop partway through their route at the end and say, oh, wow, I did this one. So let me just update it. I know I did this. Let me update, but they hit the geocode by accident. And then we get a geocode request that's 7,500 yards away from the actual location. And that's what they did.
And that request, you can also look at a map of it. It'll show you the distance of the original where the geocode was set.
Yep.
And where the request for the new geocode is. And that's very helpful when you're looking at going back to those farm routes. A lot of times the gang of mailboxes is down at the main street, not down the farm road.
Right.
And you'll see, 4, 10, 15 mailboxes with tubes down at the main street. And that's where the delivery's taking place.
Right. Exactly.
So there's actually no reason to even drive down that street.
Right.
And if that's where the geocode is, CarrierTrack's going to take you down that street. So again, that's CarrierTrack functioning properly, but the system is not what you want it to be. So you want to move that geocode down to the street corner, so that then the driving directions from CarrierTrack will not bring you down that street that would be a waste of time.
Yes.
And remember back in our in episode 1, we talked about the list that Tod originally sent. We needed these 15 things, I think it was. Not one of them was needs to be easy button. There is no easy button. You got to put in the work.
Exactly.
So to Jeff's point, it's all there. It's a matter the workflow's there, but you still got to put in the effort.
Right. And if any of you have ever been through any sort of system implementation of any kind, be it accounting or resource planning or Salesforce automation, it's very similar. All of the tools are there. And the thing that is on you at this point is you have to put in the time, you have to do the upfront work, and you'll get paid back 1,000 times over on the back end. And then you also need to make sure that you look at your logistics and your processes and how you do things and make sure that those line up with the ultimate goal of what you're trying to do with this sort of automation.
Right.
And I think the natural tendency, and this is what we had with our drivers, was they just turn the phone on and it's magic and everything works.
Yeah.
And they realize that now, and we all now know what steps we need to do when we bring on a new route, or we create a new route, or we build one. These are the steps we take, and now it's second nature to us.
Sure.
And off we go. So
Right.
It works out
And
great.
again, that's part of the reason we're doing these podcasts, is to bring in the best practices. I'm going to drift off a little bit into our second topic because it's so related to the first.
Yep.
Understanding geocodes and the delivery ellipse. One of the things that I wanted to start with, when you listen to this, it seems like, wow, this is overwhelming to do all of these different things, and it's really not. It's just a matter of setting up processes. To start with, RouteSmart uses the best rooftop geocodes available.
Right.
And the primary reason that they stay with the rooftop is it gives the best sequence in their system. So in order to put out the safest, most effective route for delivery, the rooftop geocode is the source to do that with. Now, with that said, that's not the best from a navigational point of view in CarrierTrack. And we learned that way back when, as what was happening with rooftop geocodes coming out of RouteSmart was it would ask you to drive up the driveway. And so when you get to if it's a city street, it's not a big deal because it's right there anyways. But if it's more of a rural area, farmhouses, it's actually thinking you need to drive a quarter mile down the driveway to get to the farmhouse to deliver the paper. Well, that farmhouse is not being delivered to the door, number one. Number two, you don't need to be driving down anybody's driveway.
Right.
So what we did was recognize that and looked at how we could easily change that. Instead of trying to move every rooftop to the curb in the RouteSmart system by doing the pinning, we take their file and we take anything that comes. It's a 1, a 0, and a
100.
100.
Yep.
-1, 0, 100.
Yep.
And basically, if it's coming through as a rooftop geocode, it's never been moved by the newspaper. We automatically take those rooftops and convert them to navigational geocode, so it puts it down at the curb. Still gives you right or left side of the road, but basically it's putting it down at where you're delivering most of the time is right there at the curb. Whether it's a driveway toss or a tube, it's right there. So we do that automatically prior to the file being loaded in CarrierTrack for delivery that night. Now that'll give you your entire route in the exact same sequence that RouteSmart did it. So there's no change to the sequence. It's only moving the rooftop down to the curb. So from that point of view, you're getting a lot of what you need done automatically. So now if you've already moved the geocode, we can see that through the coding of how the rooftop or how the reconciliation came through from RouteSmart. So if it's a rooftop geocode, it's a 100. If it's a moved geocode from the newspaper, it comes through as a -1. So we know not to touch that.
Right.
If it's been moved, we never touch it again. We will never change that to a navigational. If it's a 0, that goes back to what you were saying earlier, Todd, where the address is wrong. Something's wrong with the address itself that does not let it geocode in the system.
Yep.
And that has to be manually fixed by the newspaper. And typically it's an address. Either they transpose some numbers or they misspelled the name.
Right.
Something of that nature is preventing it from doing that. If it's a 00 in RouteSmart, it's a 00 in CarrierTrack. A lot of times we could fix that, but the problem is it's not been sequenced. we're not in the position of running that back through. That's the newspaper's responsibility to run the route through RouteSmart. We take the final sequence, whatever it is. So if it's a 00, it's gonna do the same thing. It's gonna come to the top of your delivery list as the 00. And again, that it will be on your list for delivery in CarrierTrack. Again, it's not in the sequence. Hopefully the driver knows where to go with it. But the one thing that the driver can do is still use that geocode updater and provide the information back to management where they're delivering that paper to, so that management could then put that into the RouteSmart system as the preferred, and then that would come through to us next time as a -1 and be in the proper sequence position.
Right. Yep.
The other thing that I was going to touch on briefly is the ellipse. There's not a lot to that, but just the general understanding of how that's working in CarrierTrack for the driver. So as you're driving, it's looking forward and side to side. Now you can select a right side only, left side only, which basically cuts your ellipse down. But typically in the standard mode of operation, it's looking forward and side to side. So rough numbers, it's looking forward 120 feet, looking side to side 40 feet. So you're looking at an 80 by 120 ellipse. It's not looking backwards. It's never looking backwards.
Yep.
And so it's sensing the motion that you're driving in. So in essence, if you were driving in reverse, it would then be looking backwards, but don't do that. Not a safe operation.
No.
Deliver it forward, and what it's going to be doing is looking forward and side to side for that reconciliation. And so what it's doing is it's taking the spot on the earth that CarrierTrack is in, where your vehicle is in right now. As you're approaching, it's always looking for the next address that is scheduled to be delivered in order. And as it comes up, it will then read that to you. And so Todd, you touched on this earlier, that sometimes for whatever reason, it doesn't reconcile, and they're sitting in a parking lot later and updating manually the reconciliation. Typically, the number one reason it doesn't reconcile is just that is the placement of it.
You're right.
Occasionally, something else will happen, but 90% plus, it's pure and simple. The difference between where you're delivering that paper and where the geocode is outside of that ellipse that we were just talking about. Yeah. Now, there are possibilities to manage the ellipse settings. And the only real advantage is in some very rural areas. It will pick it up faster, but it's not. Again, you're still, when you look at the size of the ellipse, that's really where the setting is that you want it, from the standpoint of getting that paper exactly where it needs to be in the middle of the night. Right. And that's what's important with this type of delivery. Yeah. Again, going back to package delivery or something else, I mean, it's completely different. You're doing it in the daytime. If it gets you close enough, you're going to find that delivery point. Right. But in the middle of the night, middle of a snowstorm, driving rainstorm, you want that ellipse as tight as possible, bringing you up to that delivery point.
Yep. Agreed.
So let me ask a question then. Does that mean the delivery point itself doesn't have a geofence, but the vehicle
it's not a fence? Yeah, correct. Exactly correct, Jason.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's the fence is really in the vehicle.
Right. It's a moving geolocation fence, or
the
geo-bubble.
Exactly. The locations are pre-programmed based on the delivery sequence,
right,
and in that order.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's go on to the last topic for today, common fixes, Todd, that you found out in the field.
Yep. So there's a lot of them, and I'll try to rattle them off because we've been through them all 1,000 times, and you get to the point. We're to the point now where we can, a new driver or someone can come in with an issue, and we know exactly what it is all the time. So Number one thing would be device kind of issues. And the biggies that we need to check on the phone is, number one is you have to make sure that you have your location services turned on. Without location services on, the phone doesn't know where it is. And that CarrierTrack will not be able to do anything if it can't figure out where you are. Number two, this one sounds counterintuitive to the old days where you had a data plan or a calling plan and, oh, I got to get on Wi-Fi because it's killing my data plan and all that. Now, most of that's unlimited and all that. But the problem with Wi-Fi, the drivers need to make sure that the Wi-Fi is off on their phones. Because if any of you've ever seen or know or have Xfinity provides a Xfinity Wi-Fi on every one of their devices. And the original plan at Xfinity Comcast was to provide this massive coverage of free Wi-Fi for the entire country with this Xfinity Wi-Fi, where someone could actually connect to your Wi-Fi at home in a sort of a segregated segment of the network and use this free Wi-Fi at a very low speed. Well, if you've ever watched a phone as you're doing the deliveries, it will attempt to connect to every single Wi-Fi access point that's available during the delivery.
Right.
And what happens on a phone is when the Wi-Fi is on, it's going to try that as its first option, because thinking that, cheaper delivery mechanism and in many times better quality. So the phone is constantly going to be cycling between Wi-Fi and cellular and trying to do that all the time. Absolute nightmare. So location services on and Wi-Fi off. Okay. The other little hiccup that we found recently on some of the newer phones is the newer versions of Android will also poll your Bluetooth connection to see if there is an available device on that Bluetooth as well, be it some sort of communications device or what have you. So unless the driver is using the Bluetooth to connect it to their car stereo system and so forth, which, like when I'm doing it in my truck and I'm testing, I put the audio of CarrierTrack, the little silicone Sally, I pump that through the speakers in my truck, and it's great because I can watch the screen and hear clearly. But unless the driver is doing that, just shut the Bluetooth off as well. A lot of times it's not practical because they may have a headset or something, but those things, the location and Wi-Fi are critical. The Bluetooth is a good one to do. So that will clear you on a bunch of the hurdles right out of the gate. The other issue that we have to make the drivers aware of when Jeff is talking about the ellipse, you've got 120 in front of you and 40 on either side. So if the driver is zigzagging, across the street in, for instance, I'll give you the perfect example, not an apartment building, but in a standalone townhomes or condos where, you've got the situation where you can knock on the neighbor's window from your window and reach out and get a cup of sugar or, some flour.
Or the sports section.
The sports section, yeah. Or, I've run out of toilet paper. Right. Can you help me out, brother?
Yeah,
So on those locations where, you're only 20 feet between the buildings, that delivery ellipse will rattle off both sides of the street, especially if it's not a divided road, if it's just a privately paved cul-de-sac. It'll be like sort of up, right up and down the road.
Yeah.
So you either, as Jeff said, you either have to do left side, right side, or if it's set for both sides, which all the drivers want, they just know that as they're working their way along, they can hear the addresses and they can see them on the screen. They just have to make sure to take a breath at the end or at some point during in that development, and make sure, just do a scroll back and make sure that they've hit all of those locations, because it'll be
quick note on that, Todd. There is an anchor button on the map. The anchor button will drop down and give you those addresses as well with the delivery instructions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great one. That's a
They're
good
just
point, Jeff.
and again, we developed it specifically because of that.
Yes, definitely. And the scenario is you're going down this little street, and it's 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, 22, 24, and they're all up, and all of those addresses are within 200 yards.
Sure.
So that's kind of the thing, but it works great. The driver just has to be aware of those kind of situations when they come across that.
Yeah. And just a side note, as you were saying, you use your Bluetooth and hear it through the car audio.
Yep.
I test like a carrier. I have my radio blasting. I I'm rolling down the street listening to what did you call her?
Silicone Sally.
Silicone Sally.
Yeah.
You know, and occasionally I'm like, wait, what did she say?
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing. You can go back to the anchor button and it will pop up that last address or the next address with whatever it was. So again, just another feature that's in there. Obviously, you can always go back into list mode and you'll see everything in list mode as well.
Yes,
But
definitely.
Again, just another use for the same tool.
Yes, definitely. And usually, like for instance, if we have RouteSmart also has a feature, a dispatch function where you can build routes, or for instance, if you have a down route, you can split them and give each driver part of a route if you need to do that. And the assumption there is the sequencing doesn't hold in there. So if I'm splitting route 1, 2, 3 into A and B, RouteSmart, rightly so, is going to optimize each of those, because it's thinking, okay, well, now you've given me this set of subscriber addresses, but now I'm going to split them. So I'm going to try to figure out the best way to do this for time and for mileage. So um, there's a good point about like list mode. If a driver is very comfortable with the route, they're going to run that in list mode. But if you're given on your phone, they say, oh, Jason, Jeff, you guys are going to do this route. You've never run it before, ever. The optimization is the way to go, because it optimizes the route and it's going to take you down the right side. And yeah, it may take a little longer, or you may loop around and have a little bit more mileage, but it's going to be much easier for the driver if they've never done it, because they're not going to know all the shortcuts and the little ins and outs. You just need to have it be clear and get them to deliver safely, and get everybody a paper and not get in an accident. So that's another scenario there too.
And that good point. For clarity, the idea there is the reason you said it. I've got a down route, so time is of the essence. So what the algorithm is trying to do is create n number, in your case, or n letter A and B routes that are geographically compact, and balances those two based on time.
Exactly. Exactly. And those necessarily, the doing it based on time is not necessarily mean you're going to split the numbers right down the middle.
Correct.
You're going to split the time down the middle. That's our goal, is to get both those drivers done at approximately the same point in time.
Yeah. Now, and the other thing you mentioned there is specifically about the dispatch or the dispatch functionality. The latest release also has now a dispatch history functionality, whereby I can go back and see what routes were split or what was done. So I've got a history. I believe it maintains it for 2 weeks.
Yes, it does.
There's that as well. If you need to go back and for compensation or help me remember who did this, there is a dispatch history.
And then as you both know, that, and someone new to this whole system may not know, is that in the new versions of everything, we can now take those dispatch, those down routes, split them, and then send them to the phone.
Right.
Which is a recent addition. That's been a huge thing.
Yep.
But if I could recap the biggest things, the biggest gotchas and things that you want to take care of, is the number one would be your device setup. Make sure that you've got location and Wi-Fi. Next thing is take the time to pin and sequence the way that you want those routes done. The pinning and the sequence, as I said, will pay back dividends 1,000 times over down the road. And then when the drivers are doing the route, is we want to make sure that the drivers, the training of the drivers is such that they're comfortable with the list mode and the navigation mode. And then the other features like the anchor button that Jeff indicated, reconciling versus geocoding. Mm-hmm. We get this issue all the time. Reconciling on the phone is simply telling, as Jeff said, you've got a bad pin, or let's say it's a new subscriber, it's your first day delivering and it hasn't been pinned yet because they just came on board. The ellipse doesn't grab the address, so it didn't reconcile. So it shows it as being undelivered. Well, you did. Well, you can manually tell CarrierTrack, yeah, I delivered that. That's a reconcile versus a geocode where you've done the delivery, but you want to update that delivery location to another spot. That's the update of the geocode. The drivers sometimes will either A, get confused, or in their hurry, they'll hit one versus the other. Yeah. And that's where we get the random geocode update when really what they wanted to do was reconcile. So those are some of the education things, that the most common things that the drivers will hit as they go along. And inevitably, reconciliation, geocoding, or portions of the route not reconciling or completing are all go back to proper pinning and sequencing way back. Because if one's out of whack, the driver doesn't notice it, CarrierTrack is still waiting for them to deliver the 47th one, and they're on the 67th one. And if they're not paying attention, they realize, these aren't happening because it's still waiting for me on that other one. So all that kind of homework really pays off.
Exactly. Appreciate that. The other thing that I want to mention real quick is the dispatch functionality. I call it dispatch after hours. I think it just sounds a little sexier. But with the right, excuse me,
we missed that marketing train, man.
Jeff, right. You're sitting in a room with a plaid shirt and headphones on. I don't think there's really a lot you can do to make that sexier. Okay, I don't think.
You already got your star. That's it. Sorry.
That's
very right. True.
That's it. That's the top of the mountain there, buddy, for you.
Everybody knows me and my shirts. I've always got something going on. This actually happens to be one that's made out of recycled bottles. And as I say that, people always say, yeah, it looks like it. So anyhow, going back to dispatch after hours, with this, with dispatch after hours, it works. If you're sending it to CarrierTrack, that is, it works exactly the same as when you send your entire file feed, except much faster. So it's, when you send your entire file feed, you've got everything that's going through the processors at RouteSmart, getting the rooftop geocodes, everything we just went through. And then it gets processed, sent over to us. We do our work and send it off to the devices. With dispatch after hours, you're only taking that handful of routes that you're working on, that you're combining or splitting. So the processing on RouteSmart's end's much faster. Then it comes over to us, same thing, much faster.
Yep.
And right off to the devices. So, but again, it goes to rooftop over there, then to navigational, and then also obviously anything that was manually set's not changed. So that always stays there.
Yep.
Second thing I want to touch on real quick.
Let me clarify something there. So you said it's much faster. That's implying that it's slow at any point. The process itself is fast.
Yep.
Yeah.
To begin with, it's just faster with obviously with a much smaller number of points.
Yeah, let's just put it into real terms. I mean, I haven't seen anything that goes into RouteSmart that and again, I'm not putting a benchmark there that takes more than 20 minutes on a large file.
Yeah.
They turn them relatively quick. And when we get it, we do the same thing. So typically from the time you input it, now we're not processing exactly when RouteSmart's done.
Right.
So we take a feed and we set a standard time that we're looking for it. And that's typically a couple hours after you normally send it.
Yep.
So, but again, it's relatively quick. But when you do it in dispatch after hours, you're pressing a button that says send it now to
Right.
CarrierTrack. RouteSmart's done their processing. It's sent over to us. We automatically know because you hit that button that there's a file that's ready, and we pull it down. You're looking at like under 10 minutes total.
Sure.
Yes.
For that. Now you may spend a little bit more time yourself inside of RouteSmart as you combine them and split them. You may say, I want to try this. I want to move this from over here. I mean, that part's just whatever you're doing creatively to figure out your best options.
Right.
But once you hit send,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. You're looking at, 10 minutes, it's on the phone. So
yeah.
When I say it's much faster, that's exactly what I mean. Not that the whole process is slow by any means, but when much faster matters at 2 a.m.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Fair enough.
And we're sending, 35,000 subscriber records each day to RouteSmart. And you can pretty much set your watch that RouteSmart will bring that file in, process it, do whatever work it needs to do with sequencing and geocoding and all that kind of stuff. And, less than 20 minutes later, that file is now available in the RouteSmart online portal to be able to manipulate and work with. And what Jeff is definitely talking about is if you're splitting a route or combining a route, it's not that we're only working with this tiny little subset.
Right.
So, and Jeff, you said 10 minutes, and even our experience, it's probably a little over 5 by the time it shows up there. So it's a very quick process versus doing an entire dump of our circulation system and having to do all those iterations to the data when it goes there. So
absolutely.
One other quick thing I wanted to mention this is not really a gotcha thing. It's a training thing, but it comes up to this day. I mean, we've been using this product for a couple years now. To this day, it still happens. And you have to drill it into everyone's head from day one. RouteSmart and CarrierTrack cannot and will not change the data that comes out of your circ system.
That's right.
Okay, they say, here's the typical comment. Well, it's right in Newsware, which is our circular. It's right in Newsware. It's wrong in CarrierTrack. Okay, that's not possible. And I've told you this 1,000 times because how it works is our Newsware system every day at 3:00 runs an export of all of our subscribers after they run a routine called calculate draw. So the system processes, it says who's on vacation, who started a subscription, who stopped a subscription. Any changes to the subscription model are then caught in this calculate draw routine. Once that is done, then at that point, our draw for the following day is now locked in. It's set. It's not going to change. We send that file to RouteSmart. RouteSmart gets that file exactly like we send it. They process it. They do all their stuff, and it's ready to go. CarrierTrack then comes and takes that exact same file after RouteSmart processes it, and they put it on the phones.
Right.
RouteSmart does not have a nefarious black ops group that is going in there and changing apartment numbers and everything. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason for it, and I always tell them, is you have to look at the source address and find out what's going on. And the typical scenario is I'm delivering to 458 Elm Street. It's an apartment building. There's 6 units, and there's an apartment in the listing. There's an apartment 1, 2, 5, and 6. You never put a 3 and a 4 in the apartment number.
Right.
So 123 Elm Street, or this 456 Elm Street, if there's no apartment number next to those 2 addresses, the address, the geocode is the same.
Right.
RouteSmart and CarrierTrack say they're the same. So instead of a union leader to apartment 3 and a union leader to apartment 4, I'm going to put 2 union leaders at the address level, because there is no distinction.
Sure.
There's no delineation between those addresses. So sure enough, you'll look in CarrierTrack, it'll say apartment 1, apartment 2, apartment 4, apartment 5, and then it will say 456 Elm Street, 2 papers. You'll have the quantity next to it, 2 union leaders, but it's actually 1 for each of the
Sure.
other apartments. And that's why they say, oh, I looked in Newsware and it's perfect. And then I look in CarrierTrack and it's wrong. And okay. And then with all the time we go and research it, it's either an apartment number or the address. Something is wrong about that. And it's, they are convinced that there's a devious committee who goes in and says, who are we going to screw with today?
Yeah, I will say we do have a black ops group. It's not, we didn't sick them on you guys yet. So
yeah, right.
But don't tell anybody else though.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Tod, I gotta just say, I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah,
really. Yeah, really.
Yes.
It's so funny because I've said that many times, and when people do test CarrierTrack for the first time, and again, how do they test CarrierTrack for the first time? They're just so happy to have something on their device, and they turn it on and they go run it.
Yes, they do.
And all of the things that we were just talking about today, they experience.
Yes.
And they're like, well, boy, I don't know. I mean, CarrierTrack doesn't look like it's right. I'm like,
yeah,
it's right. You just need to do some work,
right,
to get it fixed. So again, what I always say, CarrierTrack is the magnifying glass.
Yep.
You think that your system is perfect, and it is from a standpoint of good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If you had 2 papers and your carrier knew that there were 2 different apartment units in that building, they would get it there.
Yeah,
it's good enough.
Exactly.
But if you're trying to navigate it, it's not good enough.
Right.
And so like you're describing, that's going to be compiled as 2, and it's going to come through. So it's going to magnify whatever I don't want to call it, I guess, a glitch in the system, a lack of detail.
Yes, correct.
So it is going to be exposed.
Yes.
And some of that is just through not enough information in the system, or something being fat fingered, whatever the case may be. But that's when it gets exposed, is when it's in the CarrierTrack app.
Yes.
Because the rest is good enough.
Exactly. And you'll also get that, especially up north in New Hampshire, where it'll say, the address, the name, it may be a store or a subscriber, and it'll say Route 16, Moultonboro, New Hampshire. Well, how am I going to deliver to that? I mean, there's just no way I'm going to do that.
Don't ask questions, just deliver.
That's right. And the analogy I make to the drivers.
Don't worry, CarrierTrack will tell you.
That's right. The analogy I make to the drivers is this is like IKEA furniture. Okay, you're all excited, you get it home, but you've got some work to do there. Right. You got to break open the bag of hardware, and you've got to take the time to put it together and get it the way that you want. No more would you expect to bring that piece of furniture home and be ready to roll than you would just turn on a phone and say, oh, it's fine, everything's working great. No, the getting the data feed into RouteSmart, now you've got it in the place where you can manipulate it and get it ready. And then when it goes to CarrierTrack, if it's done right and you put in the time, it will work exactly as you would expect. But if you just turn it on and go, you're going to run into bumps in the road, no pun intended.
And CarrierTrack cannot avoid the bumps.
That's correct. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's in our next release.
Yes.
And we have forward-looking radar.
Yes. Right. And hovercrafts.
Right. So, but those are the biggies that we see every day, all the time. The ones that will always bite you in the rear end. And if you can just go through that list and hit those kind of things and put in the homework, do the homework, you'll be rewarded many, many times over again. And our latest stats is 1.9
Wow.
complaints per thousand.
Wow.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
Our partners who aren't using CarrierTrack, I was telling Jason earlier, Jeff, we're between 12 and 14 per thousand. And you say, wow, 14 complaints per thousand, that's not bad. No, it's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have 30,000 subscribers times 14, divide by 1,000 is 30 times 14. Okay, now you've got hundreds of complaints.
Right. And each of those complaints is tied, excuse me, specifically to a dollar value.
Exactly. And then you have to do the make good. So now you have to, guess what? It's not like returning something at the store. You give them back the product, they give you money. No, you're going to end up giving them the product anyways, and you're going to give them money back. So you've extended their subscription by another day. So you've given them a free paper and another free paper.
Yeah. Double ding.
Double ding. So there you go. Yep. So that is that's the story. And I can't state enough that in this business, as we all know, we have to retain the people that we already have. We emphasize growing, but from our perspective, it's the retention that is so important. Yeah. And by keeping the delivery, I was telling Jeff, I was telling Jason before the podcast, is we now regard ourselves as an editorial advertising arm, which is the paper. And now we have a distribution arm, even beyond like a circulation arm. Right. We are now building a little distribution company that is geared toward doing all those things that need to be done to make sure that the customer gets their paper on time, it's in the right place, and that they're happy. Yeah. And that's retention. Yep. So important.
Yeah, you're right. When I first, CPM, complaints per thousand. I think we covered that on the previous podcast.
Yep.
But you're right, 12, 14. But when you start talking dollar and that to anybody, that seems minuscule. You start talking dollar figures, up it goes.
Yes, exactly. And at our worst point, 3 or 4 years ago, when the management realized, this is before I came on board, right before, but when we realized
take no ownership, you take no ownership. Yeah. Smart.
It's not my problem. Right. No, but before that, and the thing that prompted them to ask me to look into this was, we were talking $7,000 a month, 84, 85 grand in a year. I mean, what can a company do with 84, 85,000 bucks a year? That's no small thing. And then if we were to lose, like Jeff, we were talking, we have some partners who don't use CarrierTrack and RouteSmart who have absolutely abysmal complaint numbers. And in those areas, last year, we lost almost 3,500 subscribers.
Wow.
And that is between $500,000 and $600,000 in revenue.
And look how much they spend getting a new subscriber.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Spend a portion of that on retaining them.
Exactly. To the point now where, we're even looking at expanding our delivery area directly because we have these great tools in RouteSmart and CarrierTrack, and we understand them, we know how they work, and we know how to implement them. So now we're to the point where do we now begin to grow that part of our business where we're taking on more of our own deliveries and our partner deliveries because we have the model nailed down now. So is it in our best interest now to grow our own homegrown delivery simply because we can't afford not to? It just costing us too many subscribers and too much money for just a simple thing of you as a partner, you can't get the paper from here to here in this time window. Sounds really simple, but it's not. There's a lot of moving parts. So that's where we're at. And if, like I said in my first one, we can't afford to do this. Well, no, you can't afford not to do it. And I still hear that oh, it's a lot of money. And no, I can tell you that in the first year, you're going to get a return on your investment. Yeah. And if you don't, you're going to get long-term, you're going to get destroyed.
You are the best salesperson we have.
Gosh. Yeah, I'm out.
Jason and I are just gonna.
I might just stay on vacation.
Mic drop.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I think it's a great time to end this season 1, episode 2. I look forward to episode 3. It's always great chatting with you both.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, enjoy the rest of your vacation, and Tod, hope you got one coming soon. My crew behind the scenes, Oscar and Rick, we all thank you for your time, and thank all of our listeners out there. Again, delivery made easy with CarrierTrack Technologies. Thank you.
Later,
Thank you, guys.